Good evening. I'm Connecticut Realtors President Michael Barbaro. I'll be your moderator for this evening's Democratic gubernatorial primary debate. Welcome. I'd like to start out by introducing our panelists. First, on the left, we have CTR TV's Christy Oles. In the center seat, we have WTNH Chief Capital Correspondent Mark Davis. Excuse me. And on the right, we have the Editor-in-Chief of Connecticut News Junkie, Christine Stewart. Our candidates for this evening, first candidate here, immediately to my left, he is the Democratic candidate, endorsed candidate. He is a businessman from Greenwich, Mr. Ned Lamont. And to his left, we have Mayor Joe Ganim. He is in his sixth term. Joe is in his sixth term as mayor of Bridgeport, Connecticut's largest city. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. At this time, we're going to start with opening statements. We're going to ask Mr. Lamont to start us off. You have 1 minute, 30 seconds, sir.
Well, Michael, thank you. And to all the realtors here, you know better than anybody else that the middle class is getting slammed and people are beginning to lose confidence that Connecticut can get back on track, which is so unnecessary because we are an amazing state with great resources, an amazing quality of life, wonderful educational institutions, but we've been let down by the political class for many, many years. This is why it's time for a fundamental change. You don't need another legislator or mayor. How about, for the first time in many generations, a governor who actually started up a business and created jobs to help lead the state, which is having a hard time starting up businesses and creating jobs. You need something else. You're going to need a governor who will be absolutely fearless when it comes to taking on the status quo, shaking up the old ways of doing business in Hartford, taking on the entrenched interests, and yet also able to bring people together to get Connecticut working again. I think that's what I've been doing all my life. You know, my business, I took on the cable TV industry. I took them on. I delivered a better service at a lot less cost. And that's how we beat them. You know, you need a little bit of that entrepreneurial zip in Hartford sometimes, too, so we can streamline our services, deliver a better service at less cost. And I think many of you remember I also took on a senator in my own party when I thought he was wrong. I think you're going to know that I'm somebody who's always willing to stand up and do what I think is right, and that's what I'll do as governor. Joe, I look forward to a good debate on the issues with you. Thanks for being here.
Same here, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. Mayor Ganim.
Thanks so much. Let me start by saying thank you, and also that Connecticut is a great state with great potential and tremendous opportunity. But you also have, though, a massive wealth inequality in Connecticut, leading to almost 2 Connecticut's. I'm running for governor to build a better Connecticut economy that works for everyone, not just the wealthy few. And that starts with reinvesting in our cities as engines to drive economic growth and opportunity. And when we do that, everyone wins. But at the same time, as we all know, our state is facing a massive budget deficit. And we're not going to fix that by just raising taxes or cutting spending. We're going to need to attract businesses, create jobs, and grow the economy in all parts of Connecticut. Now, some of you may know a little about my background. After pulling Bridgeport out of bankruptcy and putting it back on track with fiscal stability and job growth for almost 10 years or over 10 years, I made some terrible errors in judgment. I broke the law. I resigned from office, and I went away. 3 years ago, I was blessed with the opportunity to lead the state's largest city once again. And a renewed commitment to accountability and transparency, we now have over $1 billion of investment going on in Bridgeport right now, redeveloping our waterfront and our downtown. Along with our waterfront and our downtown, a new amphitheater today. I got a second chance, but more importantly, I'm going to fight to give everyone in Connecticut a first chance to succeed. And together, with your help, we can do it and build one Connecticut that works for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor. At this time, we're going to move on to our questions. Our first question will be asked by CTR TV's Christy Oles, and will be asked of Mr. Lamont. Christy?
CT Realtors conducted a statewide poll earlier this year. It shows 70% of those who responded said they had a friend move out of Connecticut, leave the state within the past 3 years. What is your proposal to reverse this trend of outward migration from Connecticut?
That news about folks leaving Connecticut, that news about GE leaving Connecticut, that did hit us like a gut punch. But what would be even worse is if we don't learn from that mistake. So I'll tell you what I did after GE left. I got together the leaders from GE, I got together business and labor, I got together Republicans and Democrats, a lot of whom hadn't talked to each other in a long time. And we sat down and we said, why did you leave and what can we learn from this? And they told us 3 things. They said, number 1, Connecticut, you're not training people for the 21st century. Number 2, your transportation system is in gridlock. We can't get people to our campus. And number 3, you can't get your fiscal act together. You can't get a balanced budget. So that's what we've got to learn. That's what we've got to do going forward. The tragedy would be not learning from what the GE story told us. And we've learned from that. Well, I'll tell you what I did. I went around to a lot of the leading businesses. We put together a workforce study. We found out the jobs they needed over the next 10, 20 years. We went to the community colleges. We started training people, working on the skills in the classes they're going to need to train people for those 21st century jobs. We'll be talking about transportation going forward. And the other thing we did was we contacted a major IT training company. They're going to be locating right in Hartford, Connecticut by the end of this year, training people. So those folks who are leaving because they don't find opportunity, jobs, and skills are going to be coming back because this is going to be the state where those opportunities await them.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. Mayor Ganem, 1 minute.
1 minute.
1 minute, please.
Let me say, the fact that people and businesses are leaving in Connecticut is reflective of what we're doing or not doing right, basically in large part in state government. The failure to be able to reconcile a budget for repeated years and create uncertainty is the worst thing you can do for people that want stability in their lives, whether they're trying to make ends meet to raise a family or trying to run a business. The GEs, the Alexions, the talks of other companies who've either left or thinking of leavings is the thing we've got to stop and change, certainly in Connecticut. We're going to do it by focusing on balancing the state budget. We've got to get that, as difficult as it might be, get that put back on track. And from there, we've got to be business friendly. We've got to turn around the economy, but we've also got to look at our transportation needs and let them know that we care and we're going to invest in our infrastructure so the companies can understand the reliability of getting from one place to another and getting their employees from their homes to their work. I can say some things about what I've done in Bridgeport. At the same time when companies are leaving, we've got great examples of companies coming in from New York into Connecticut, into Bridgeport, investing hundreds of millions of dollars as a reverse or running against that trend. Those are the type of things that we need to do to get Connecticut back on track, keep businesses here.
Thank you. Time is up, sir. Next question will be from WTNH's Mark Davis, the last of Mayor Ganem. Mark, please.
All right, as I said, with the Republican debate, I'm not asking any questions. These are all from Channel 8 viewers by way of our website and our Facebook page at WTNH. And this first question came from Lois, and you've already put this topic on the floor, but it's a little more pointed. She says, Mr. Ganem, you are a convicted felon who went to jail for political corruption. How can we trust you not to revert to your former behavior?
Appreciate the question, Lois. Certainly, question of trust in this situation or for anyone who would ask you for your vote is critical. I can only tell you this. When I returned from and looked at the opportunity or the thoughts that I still had a contribution maybe to make in public service, I'd ask myself, was this something that I thought I could do? From lessons learned, from mistakes made, could I in any way think that I could or should be put in a position to hold the public trust in Bridgeport? People encouraged me, and I thought. In the past, there had been things that certainly I greatly regretted. But if I could still make a contribution, on my best days when we took a city out of bankruptcy, created jobs, created an atmosphere in some of the most difficult neighborhoods with some challenging issues in schools and lack of economic development, we had made improvements that people looked at and said, what's going on in Bridgeport? These are positive things. I felt that if I brought the right people around me, one who was the chief individual for the federal government that prosecuted that municipal corruption case in Bridgeport, came to me and said, Joe, if you decided to run again, he would support me. Came into that campaign and came into this administration and became head of public integrity. I can only tell you this. I've had the honor and the blessings, I said, to serve again on a local level. 32,000 people have given me the opportunity to be standing here on stage today. As I said in church when I went back to Bridgeport, and hope you'll accept this as not my words, but one that ring in the back of my head. Every saint has a past, and I believe and hope that every sinner is a future.
Sorry, time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you can hold your applause, please. Mr. Lamont, since that was a very specific question, I will give you the opportunity to address it, or you can use your time to speak to something else.
I just say that the public trust is the most sacred oath one takes as a public servant. You are there fighting every day for the people of your city or the people of your state. And I salute the people of Bridgeport. They gave Joe Ganim a second chance after he badly abused the trust of those people. And I would just say, they gave you a second chance. Now fight for them. Complete your term. Turn around Bridgeport. I would like, as your governor, to work with you every day to make Bridgeport an incredible success. So each and every one of those people do it.
Please hold your applause. I'm going to ask you again to hold your applause. Mr. Gannon, would you like to use a challenge?
May I? We just hold them up. That's all we can do with
That's
them,
all
right?
you have to.
Okay.
Yes. They're on a lanyard. You can't go very far.
This is, and I appreciate Ned's comments to a certain extent. But I think more fundamentally, when you talk about Bridgeport and the last 3 years and the elements of accountability and transparency that we've tried to put in place, I think we've delivered on those, but more importantly, or maybe just as important, depending on how you look at it, we delivered on the important things in public service that you're supposed to do. The record of balancing budgets, of creating jobs, of attracting business, of trying to fight to improve the quality of schools. I do that every day. I've got over a decade of commitment to that public service.
Sir,
I don't fly into public service every 4 or 8 years, want to make a statement about it, and if it doesn't work out, leave.
Thank you.
That's my commitment to Bridgeport, and I believe to Connecticut
Thank you,
as well.
sir. Reminder to our audience, please hold your applause. We'd like to get as many questions in as possible. Our third question is from Christine Stewart from Connecticut News Junkie, and be asked of Mr. Lamont.
So, Mr. Lamont, much has been made earlier in this race about how many bathrooms you have in your home. So I wanted to give you a chance to show that you understand what the middle-class families in the state of Connecticut go to by telling us how much a gallon of milk costs.
Let me just say, first of all, about bathrooms. I do have the support of the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union, by the way. I'm very proud of that. But more importantly, look, Joe and I just came from $3. Joe and I just each came back from
Please.
a great opportunity. We both came, we had successful parents. We got to go to good suburban schools. We had a good education. And then our paths took very different directions. But what's most important is everybody get that same opportunity that Joe and I got. That means education. That means early childhood education. That means after school. That means expanding our community colleges so people are trained for the jobs. It's not a question of who has how much. It's how do you lift everybody up and give them that opportunity. And that's what we failed to do as a state for a long, long time. And as I said before, the middle class is getting squeezed. A lot of folks are feeling in the working class that they're getting left behind, and we have a state that's not paying attention to them. I guarantee you, as a governor, I will fight every day to lift those folks up. Right here in New Haven, the first thing I'd like to do is make sure we have the best schools possible. We're having a hard time recruiting enough teachers, having a hard time recruiting teachers of color, we're having a hard time recruiting men. I'm going to forgive student loans for each and every one of those teachers that come and teach one of our urban school districts, so each and every one of those kids gets the very best opportunity, Christine.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lamont. I'd like to remind, before Mayor Ganim goes, I'd like to remind the audience, please be respectful of the candidates and their answers, please. Mayor Ganim, 1 minute, sir.
Well, I appreciate the thoughts. The difference, and no disrespect to, and this is not a commentary, it's just an observation, of the degree of wealth of my opponent ranged from somewhere between 90 and 300 million is no secret, nor should it be. And whether or not people want to evaluate that to whether or not he can connect in places like the neighborhoods of some of our cities. And I thought I understood with a great degree after serving as mayor some of the challenges that people face in my city. But going around and getting 32,000 signatures in cities and towns across Connecticut, I was even more humbled. I became even more sensitive to the challenges that people have and the needs that we have all across Connecticut with people struggling. I'm not saying that I was blessed to grow up in a great home. But I can tell you this. We had 8 children in our family, but we never had 8 bathrooms.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next question is back around to Christy Olds of Mayor Ganem, please.
We have kind of touched on it, but attracting business to Connecticut is not always about taxes and incentive packages. The state government must also be one that businesses can work with and work with easily. Other states have a more streamlined permitting and approval process, which makes them more attractive to business. What would be your administration's approach to making Connecticut more attractive and competitive in drawing those businesses to the state?
Well, as much as those businesses that you're kind of talking about have struggled and met challenges, I have too. We have a train station that was set to go off and be built and should have been half built by now by state DOT. And without getting caught up in the kind of the details of it, it's still sitting there. And that can be was supposed to be a high-speed rail stop in Bridgeport. We all know how important that can be for the connectivity of transportation and the advancements in the planning. But I think fundamentally, one of the challenges that I see and one of the drawbacks that's not happening on a state level is the coordination. Let's say between that department, the Department of Transportation, and the Department of Economic Development and Housing, and how they seem to run in, let's call it separate silos with separate priorities. And sometimes there's no coordination on the expenditures of what's tens of millions, let's say hundreds, even billions of taxpayers' dollars on a strategy. I hope there's a strategy, but it doesn't seem to be one for either department that seems to be effective. So with that as an example, I can tell you that one of the things we've been able to do successfully on a local level is to address that. We wouldn't have over $1 billion of private investment coming into the city of Bridgeport right now. Waterfront development, restoration of our theaters, 2 new tallest buildings in Bridgeport to set a new skyline, the amphitheater that we broke ground on today with Live Nation. And the list, if I had more time, would go on and on. Unless we're able to understand the challenges that businesses have, to address them, and make it easy for them to create jobs and invest in our city, that's what I'll do as governor for Connecticut.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Lamont, you have 1 minute, sir. 1 minute, please.
I'll tell you a couple of things. One, Connecticut has a bad case of the slows. In business, when you want an answer now. That means how's training going to interface with transportation? What does that mean for the brownfields? I want one-stop shopping. I want a SWAT team so I can get people that answer. And number 2, you want a governor who actually talks to the business leaders. You know, my God, we were shocked when Alexion left. And I can't believe that Mass Mutual is going. I read about it in the newspaper. That is not going to happen when Ned Lamont is governor. I'm going to know these people. I'm going to be working with these people. I won't be able to keep every one of them here, but I sure will be there to address their needs and what they got to do. And I'll tell you something else. They'll know they're working with a governor who's straight up, working with integrity. They'll be able to look me in the eye and know that I'll keep my word, and Connecticut will keep its word, and that'll help them come and stay, grow, and expand.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. Our next question, Mark Davis, will ask of Mr. Lamont.
I wouldn't normally do this, but Lois had another good question, this one for Ned. Usually only one question per customer, but Lois struck the jackpot here. It's the same Lois. She said, Mr. Lamont, the current occupant of the White House is perhaps the poster child for why running a business is not good training for running a government. You think she's a Democrat? Anyway, please tell us how your business experience and no government experience qualifies you to run our state.
Let me tell you about my no government experience. When I first moved to town, I immediately ran for the Board of Selectmen. I went from there, I was on the Board of Finance. From there, I got to know a guy named Lowell Weicker, and he asked me to run the State Pension Board. When I was on that State Pension Board, I shouted from the rafters, if you don't invest in your pension fund, you're going to be in a pickle in 15 years, and here we are today. I have spent my life involved in public service as well as private work, and I'm proud of that. I was a part-time volunteer in Harding High School in Bridgeport. I'm now a professor up at Central Connecticut State University, where every day I try and get together business, or every class I try and get together business and labor leaders to work together going forward. And by the way, Donald Trump doesn't have an ounce of public service in his life. It's always been all about Donald Trump all the time. I'd look at some other states. Look at Massachusetts. They outperform us in just about every metric, and most of their governors over the last 25 years are folks who come from the private sector, fueled with a real sense of public service. That is true. You know, that's everything from Deval Patrick to even Mitt Romney. I look at Virginia. I look at the governor down in New Jersey. I think it's time for a real change in terms of how we do business, Mark, here. So I tell Lois, I'm going to be that guy that brings real change to Hartford. I'm going to do it fearlessly, and I'm going to bring smart business practices so we deliver services at a lot less cost.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. Mayor Ganem, you have a minute for rebuttal, sir.
No, Lois, I have that same question and concern. I've seen it time and time again, whether it's in the course of a campaign, where someone comes in business, is either the beneficiary of large amounts, think they can step into a political process, throw a lot of money at it, and fix it. In government, sometimes people step into business, out of business, a la Trump, and we get more than just an amusement disaster. We get a misdirection of a country that's demonstrated inhumanity and un-American practices, most recently on our borders. We can agree or disagree on some of the economic policies and budgets, but we've seen something that you never would have believed could happen in America today. Now, I don't know what public service in Greenwich is like, and no disrespect to Greenwich, but if their pension board is in a pickle, and that's a challenge, I got to tell you, if you want to try and run a big city or the state of Connecticut with the budget problems we have, it's a whole different world. You are hit from 7 different which ways, not only with pensions, with health care costs, trying to keep property taxes down, and the cost of education as well.
Thank you, Mayor.
One quick comment. I ran the pension board for the state of Connecticut. I managed the $20 billion pension fund. I advised 4 different treasurers. We got that turned around, and we shouted from the rafters what we have to do. And frankly, looking at the Bridgeport pension, what's happened there on your watch, my God, the pension is what our city employees and our state employees need to live on. And a lot of these teachers don't even have Social Security. So you better get that right. You better have somebody with integrity who's doing that investing and pays attention to it every day.
Could I?
You can use a challenge, sir. Can I get 1 minute on the clock, please?
You're responsible for where the state pensions are right now. But regarding the Bridgeport pensions, I can tell you that this past 2 years alone, coming into a budget deficit that I took over from my opponent, we went up to the General Assembly, and without asking for money for our pensions, we got enabling legislation that allowed us to utilize the financial markets to save some $60 million off our pension funds. So we're being creative and saving taxpayer monies. If you'd like me to share some of the details with you, I'd be happy to do it. Because it's going to take that type of innovation. It's going to at least be the beginnings of how we start to address things like the unfunded pension liabilities for the state of Connecticut, and whether or not we try and fund them as they need to be funded, or go to a pay-as-you-go, which is not the right approach.
Mr. Lamont, my apologies. You were only given 30 seconds. I'm going to give you another 30 seconds. Can I get 30 seconds on the clock if you'd like to readdress that, please?
The pension funding in Bridgeport is worse than before Joe Ganem came in. Joe Ganem went and borrowed a lot of money right at the very top of the market, and then the market collapsed, and these people were left worse off. He failed to fund the pension many, many years. That is the exact same type of bad behavior that got us in trouble in Hartford. That's what we got to change. That's why you need a new type of thinking in Hartford.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. You do.
I mean, I appreciate your interest in the Bridgeport Pension Fund, and I hope, as with the other cities, if you look at them, this is an obligation or an opportunity. Let's put it that way, an opportunity I look at as an obligation that the state of Connecticut can look at for a comprehensive urban strategy that includes all of our cities, whether it's Hartford, Waterbury, New Haven, Bridgeport, and we can go on and on. A comprehensive strategy that stabilizes our largest cities' finances so we don't have this over-reliance on property taxes to fund both local government and public education, which is the most regressive tax. So in one way or another, I look forward to that type of dialogue, whether it's about Bridgeport or any of our cities. If I had more time, do I have more time? Can I use this for 1 more minute?
You can.
All right.
The clock, please.
One thing that does bother me, there have been people, and it's not just the mayor, that work hard every day for years, for decades, to try and fight against sometimes they seem to be very difficult odds to move our urban centers forward. Now, casting dispersions on Bridgeport, I was in Stonington when you called Hartford a mess. I heard you agree with a very conservative columnist who said you were suffering fools when talking to people in New Haven. This is not the type of sensitivity that we need in a state that has cities with challenges, with people with the greatest needs and vulnerabilities. We need a sensitivity and understanding of the challenges that we have in every city and town in Connecticut. But by God, especially in our cities, where we house people with the greatest needs, of greatest concentration, with the least amount of resources. I hope and I believe that I'm misreading what I heard and what you intended. But at the end of the day, we've got to be, at least in my job, whether it's as mayor or governor, sensitive to and fight hard as I will for people every day who have some of the greatest needs. I think that's the role and responsibility of a public servant.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Lamont would like to use another challenge. Can I get 1 minute on the clock, please?
Hey, sorry, you guys are going to be able to get a question here in a minute, I'm sure. But you didn't just misread that. You make that up, Joe. You've got to have a certain relationship with the truth. I am going to be a champion for our cities. I love Hartford. I see Luke Bronin down there. I will be your partner every day to turn around our capital city. And I have a plan to turn it around. 20 years in Bridgeport, Joe, he's got a lot of work to do. I love Bridgeport, and I will work every day to help you turn that city around. First thing I'm going to do is education funding. Make sure that those schools are well funded. So we have great schools in Bridgeport. So people want to move back to Bridgeport for the schools. You have flat funded education virtually every year you've been there. You had a 29% tax increase and you flat funded education. That's no way to give each and every one of those kids an opportunity, and that's no way to help a city get back on its feet. I'll be a champion for transportation. I want a transportation hub right in Bridgeport, as well as Hartford, as well as New Haven, because I think transportation will be part of the energy that brings our cities back to life.
Thank you. Would you like 30 seconds?
Can I take a minute and 30 seconds? I got a lot to say.
You've used up your minutes, but you do have 30 seconds.
Misrepresentation and lying on flat funding of education, number one. I've got a tax increase when it doesn't either understand or recognize what revaluation is at a time when some property taxes go up, some go down. And I also have a comment, because the mayor of Hartford is right here. We were in Stonington together, and he said, yeah, 8 years ago when I ran, there were long lines. Every place in Connecticut is better. He looked over and said, but Hartford's a mess. And I stood up after that. You were there. And I said, look, Mayor and I, at least at that point, didn't agree on everything. Oh. But I will tell you one thing. I don't like the fact you take a disparaging shot at Hartford. So that is true. 2, we have a flat-funded education. I'll send you a copy of my budget. Please. And 3, there's a thing called revaluation. It's mandated by the state of Connecticut. It was put over 4 years. My time's up. All right.
I
get
apologize. No, you've used them up.
Yeah.
Mark Davis is going to go out and grab a cocktail. He'll be back. Thank you for that spirited debate. We're going to move on to our next question. Our next question is from Christine Stewart of Mayor Ganem.
For who? So, to Mayor Ganem. So cities apparently need a lot of attention. So have you neglected the city of Bridgeport by flying to the Texas border and crisscrossing the state, petitioning your way onto the ballot?
Thank you. Well, crisscross, so there's 2 parts of it. Let me try and answer both of them, and then I'm sure Ned might have something to say about it too. El Paso, I got a call at about 3 o'clock from the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I serve as a member of the advisory board and an officer on a committee that actually passed 2 resolutions in Boston a week or 2 before. Other mayors were there as well, with regards to the inhumane policies of the Trump administration. We were called because we wanted to make a statement with the mayor of New York, the mayor of Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle. 15 mayors were asked to join if we could last minute. We thought it was that important. We tried to get in. We wanted to make a statement, and what I said on that border, and it was a moving event as well. And it's actually moved me even closer to some of the challenges that I think that we have with immigration policy in Connecticut and how cities should handle that. But regardless, we said, and we may not be able to tell the federal government what to do as far as what the laws they can do. But as mayors of Connecticut's largest cities, we represent a population of the United States of America, and we have a right to stand here and tell them that what we believe is immoral and un-American action. And that's what we did, and I'm proud that I went down there. Now, crisscrossing the state involved also time in my city and my neighborhoods. But I will answer the second part. When I went to doors in Bridgeport, people said, well, I was hoping you'd get here. I saw you on TV. I want to sign your petition. We support you. We know you fight for Bridgeport. You fight for cities. You fight for us. I went around, and as part of that, and I went through a discussion. I'm cut off again.
I apologize, sir. Your time is up.
Problem. So I can raise my paddle after.
Mr. Lamont, you've used up your challenges. You've used up your challenges. Mr. Lamont, you have 1 minute, please.
Look, I'd only say that managing Bridgeport is a full-time occupation. And I think you can crisscross the state, you can fly to El Paso, do that on your own nickel, do it on your campaign time, but don't ask the beleaguered taxpayers of Bridgeport to pay for you, pay for your transportation and pay for that. I think you ought to take care of that. I'll tell you something else when it comes to the tax increase. It was about the grand list. The problem is they wrote down the real estate values by hundreds of millions of dollars. So you're right, a lot of that 29% tax increase was the fact that the real estate values were taken down, as well as an increase in tax rates for everybody else. There was a real tax riot going on in City Hall, or a big commotion anyway. Look, I think our cities are so vibrant to the future of this state. I'm going to be a champion for our cities. Connecticut can never be great unless our cities are great. So Bridgeport, I'm going to work every day to earn your confidence that I am there as a champion for Bridgeport. You should be an incredibly successful city, a gateway to New York, a gateway to the rest of Connecticut, and I'm going to make sure that happens.
Thank you. I apologize. Our next question.
Is there a 30-second there?
There's no 30-second there, sir. Our next question is back to Christy Olds, and she's going to ask that of Mr. Lamont. 1:30, please.
You mentioned wanting to spend more on education and funding education in the cities, but the question is how. It is one of the top things that families consider when looking to buy a home is the quality of the school district they are moving into. There's been talk for years at the state capitol about redoing the ECS funding, but it doesn't change. How do you plan to reinvest more money in education?
I think it's the most important investment we can make. It's most important for our cities, most important for opportunities for each and every one of our kids, and it's the most important way that those tens of thousands of jobs that are empty and unfilled in Connecticut can be filled by Connecticut people for Connecticut taxpayers right here in the state of Connecticut. And that's what I'm going to do. How do you do that? You do that a couple of ways. I mentioned the idea of ways that we can forgive student loans for teachers who go teach in our cities. So the very best teachers come into our cities and give those kids the very best opportunity. I take a second look at our education cost-sharing formula and make sure those places most in need get that opportunity. But also we need some revenues to do that. I've got a plan, so we're going to actually be able to expand the base on the sales tax, something that was recommended by the Fiscal Commission, as you probably remember. I want that money to go to education. I want it to go to education. That gives those kids the very best opportunity and also gives these cities and towns a better opportunity to hold down property taxes. That's so important. One last thing, we've got a lot of very small schools spread out all over the state of Connecticut, and they're very expensive for us to subsidize. So I'm going to look at ways we can have shared services. I can't afford to subsidize inefficiency. I will do everything I can to promote K through 12 education, local schools, local opportunity, better jobs for everybody.
Mayor Ganem, 1 minute.
Certainly is the Bridgeport School District and all of our urban centers, if you look at them, are, in my view, underfunded. I've not just been a voice on this, I've taken action. We sued the state of Connecticut at one point. We advocate vigorously before the General Assembly for a constitutional obligation to fully fund education. It is a disgrace. It is a disgrace to our state that you have the inequity in school district depending on your zip code. If you live in Greenwich and you can be able to afford twice as much per pupil as you are in Bridgeport, what is it that makes that student not as valuable for the opportunities they have in another? And I'm not blaming Ned because I say Greenwich, but I mean it is the issue where this cost-sharing formula is not a formula. It's been politically manipulated over the years. We need to fully fund that or a formula that allows full funding, equal quality education for every student in Connecticut. I'll fight for that as governor. I've tried to fight for it as hard as I can. As mayor of the city of Bridgeport with others, we need to fix this problem if we do nothing else. We need to fix that for the next generation.
Thank you, Mayor. Our next question is from Mark Davis. He'll ask that of Mayor Ganem.
This question,
Lois again?
Yeah, how's Lois?
No, this is Bill. He didn't put down the town.
Lois, his husband.
This is for both of you. If elected, what is your position on reopening the contract between the State Workers Union and the state of Connecticut?
Mayor Ganem.
Yeah. So, having been a mayor for now 14 years, I've negotiated numerous contracts directly or indirectly with 13 different municipal labor unions of every walk and talk. And we've walked through that. and when we make an agreement, we stick with an agreement. What we're not able to see or feel at the end of a contract is all the elements that went in, the backing, the give and the take, what someone gave up and they didn't. So in fairness, you honor your agreements. You do it with labor unions. You do it in business and you do it in government, and that's what I'll do as governor. I will tell you this. There have been times when I first came in and took the city over when it was bankrupt, and my predecessor had tried to put it in bankruptcy to break union contracts. Labor unions sat around a table with us as opposed to across the table, and we worked in a cooperative spirit to reorganize a health care plan that saved the city some $20 million a year without reducing benefits beyond an accepted level. And we agreed to other things like others have done in other communities. Sometimes contracts are reopened by agreement. When you can do that, and there's a benefit not only to, in this case, to the municipality, to the state of Connecticut, and it's by agreement, those are ways that I think can be successful. That may be an element of discussion. With all the challenges, if we're really looking at $2 billion next year, well, but in any of those situations is done by sitting down with willing parties, where both come with an open mind for ways that we can work together on a common good, for a common good purpose.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Lamont, 1 minute.
I think a deal is a deal is a deal. In my world, you make a contract, you stick with a contract. And secondly, I believe in collective bargaining. I want everybody at the table. I think labor has a right to be at that table. And I think we're going to sit down and negotiate in good faith. But Mark, I do believe in negotiating in good faith. We're going to have to find some savings. We have to find significant savings over time. When it comes to the teachers' pension fund, let me just give you some specifics. There are a lot of platitudes here. The teachers' pension fund is maybe 55% funded. As I said before, teachers don't even get Social Security. So when we're talking about, as the Republicans are, tearing up the agreement and walking away from it, think about who you're dealing with. I think you guys came up in the Fiscal Commission with a pretty good idea for the teachers' pension. We're going to put the lottery, lock, stock, and barrel, into the teachers' pension fund. That makes it better funding. If we stretch it out, there are ways that we can honor our contracts without burdening the taxpayers, and I'm going to do that through collective bargaining and negotiation.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. Our next question from Christine Stewart to Mr. Lamont.
So Republican Governor Charlie Baker of Massachusetts recently signed into law a paid family medical leave program and a $15 an hour minimum wage. Would you support those two policies in Connecticut?
I would support those two policies. Charlie Baker, another guy that comes out of business and has a very progressive agenda in Massachusetts. The question is the $15 minimum wage and paid family and medical leave. Look, I started up a business. I worked hand in glove with the folks that we built our systems together. I knew them. I knew their families. And I could not afford to lose any one of those folks to a medical emergency. So I will make that case to CBIA loud and clear. It's in the best interest of your company, the best interest of the state, not just to mention that single parent, that single mom, that she have an opportunity to take care of a sick person, give birth to that child, as well as to be able to continue working. And a $15 minimum wage for that single parent, be they in Bridgeport or Hartford, that makes a world of difference, allowing them to raise up, allowing them to take care of their kids in a better way. These are not jobs that we're going to lose to China. These are jobs that are going to stay in Connecticut. They're going to pay a decent wage and take the taxpayer out of the business of subsidizing. Those are two things I would push as a business person. And as a business person, I'd be able to get them passed.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Ganem?
Chrissy, I also
One minute.
strongly support both of those as things that we need to do, a $15 minimum wage. But I also want to just say something about what Ned talking about a businessman and how sacred he talks about his employees. You know, I've read some articles that back in 2006 when you were doing this one of your times before, that you actually laid off 70% of your employees in Connecticut while still drawing a $500,000 salary. How does that reconcile with what you said about your sensitivity for workers and people that have worked for you and your business acumen? You can't do that, and I won't do that, nor would anyone allow that to happen in government. I hope what I heard is something you can explain, because it makes no sense to me with the comments that you've made and some of the things you've told people in this election cycle.
Would you like to use a challenge, or would you like to take an opportunity to rebut for 30 seconds?
I'll rebut for 30 seconds. He's making
get
it up.
30 seconds,
There's not a
please?
word
I didn't
of truth to
mention his
that.
name. Did I? Play the tape back.
I'm gonna allow it.
Megan, look, you got to have a basic concept of the truth in order to be able to convince these people that you ought to be governor. You made that up. There's no truth to that at all. We sold a division of our company, and those people all got a job at the new place. I sold my company, and when I sold my company, I made a deal. I made sure that each and every one of those folks kept their job at the new company. They didn't have a cut in salary at all. That's what it means to be a good employer, and that's what you need for the state of Connecticut. You had the question about how we treat our state employees. I'm going to be a champion for our state employees as well and give them the credit they do for hard work they do. That's what I was as an employer, and that's what I'll be as a governor.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is for Mayor Ganem, Christy Olds.
Bipartisanship has become pretty necessary at the state capitol in recent years. The state Senate is evenly split. Democrats hold a small majority in the House. The last budget was negotiated without the input of the current governor. Barring any major shifts in this November's election in regards to the General Assembly, how do you plan to ensure a spirit of productive cooperation across the aisle?
Yes. Well, certainly that's critically important. I'll give you examples. I mean, it's easy to say what you're going to do. I can tell you what I have done. The pension stuff that I mentioned in Ned before, that was a bill, actually 2 cycles in a row. We had to go to the General Assembly to get support so that we could reform Bridgeport's pensions so that we could save, as I said, tens of millions, maybe as many as $60 million on pension funds. We did that with bipartisan support in the House and in the Senate. And with that, we were able to move that forward and save the taxpayers of the city of Bridgeport money. We had a unique environmental initiative called the Thermal Loop. The only other one in North America is at the Amazon headquarters in Seattle. In order to get the authority to prove that, we needed bipartisanship in the General Assembly. Again, an example of how we did that. This past session, on a jobs bill for entertainment, resort, casino bill that might allow for a transparent process. Bridgeport led the way in the House to have a bipartisanship to pass that bill. On important things, with the right approach, it's my view that that's how you get things done. Only successes, or the best successes I've had in Bridgeport, is getting labor and management together, business and government together, grassroots organization, with some demonstration of leadership, I hope from me and others, with a direction, a sensible direction, and then with a positive result.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lamont, 1 minute.
We got into this fiscal mess. It was a bipartisan train wreck. Plenty of blame on both sides of the aisle. And I'm going to need both sides of the aisle to come together to get this thing solved in a credible way. Look, I do pretty well with the business guys. They know who I am. They know I understand their business. They're going to be at the table. I have the backing of most of the major labor groups here. I'm proud of that because I'm going to treat them with respect. I'm going to treat them fairly. And I did that at the table. Look, I need the Democratic leaders there to come forward and make the tough choices, but I can't do it if the Republicans are going to be a roadblock. I'm going to take all the hits. I'll take the blame. I'm willing to do that in order to make sure we get this thing going. I'll share the credit wherever we got to go. But we're going to have to come together as a state if we're going to honestly balance this budget. We got a $2 billion deficit after this bipartisan agreement gave us a so-called balanced budget. You know, what a joke. It was a terrible budget, balanced on the backs of the most vulnerable. I promise you a good budget, but I can only do it if people come together. I think I'm the person who can bring people together.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. Our next question is from Mark Davis, and you'll ask it of Mr. Lamont, please.
And this is a question that came from Val. Again, I don't know what town, but VAL, Val, asks, where do you stand on Connecticut's existing gun control laws?
Not strong enough. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I know what Sandy Hook meant to this state. I know that Chris Murphy and Dick Blumenthal tell me every day, I want Connecticut to stay a leader on reasonable gun control laws. I want laws that are enforced. I don't want an intrusive government. I support the Second Amendment. But let me tell you, when I found out about ghost guns, when I found out that you can buy an AR-15 online, Mark, and get it delivered just on your credit card, delivered in 72 hours, and had that delivered right here to Connecticut, that tells me we've got a lot of work we got to do on gun control. And I'm going to be serious about what we do there. I also am going to be protective of our schools. My God, that's got to be the safest place you can go. A kid has got to know, a mother's got to know, a father's got to know that when they're there in a safe environment. These are things that are so important, and gun control is part of that solution. It's not the whole solution. You need social service folks back in our cities, back in our schools, able to listen able to talk to people. And we've been losing that along the way as well. We've been cutting back on mental health. These are all ways that we're going to bring the epidemic of gun violence down. Shooting violence is up in an awful lot of our cities right now. One of the reasons is we're also cutting back on after-school activities. I got to do everything I can to make our cities safer, and reasonable gun control laws is one way to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. Mayor Ganem.
You believe that the Sandy Hook legislation that was passed months after Sandy Hook is not strong enough? Is that what you're saying?
I told you what I do on the ghost guns that would strengthen it even more, although it's best done on a federal level.
They tried to do that this year. Okay, I got your answer.
Thanks.
Mayor Ganem, 1 minute.
Yeah, I was brought 2 students from Harding High School up with me to testify themselves against bump stock and ghost guns this past session. But that's only the latest. I go back decades. I'm not only that, but taking on the NRA, suing the gun industry to make their inherently dangerous weapons safe. I've worked hard when we passed the first assault weapons ban in Connecticut and stood on the steps of the Capitol with our distinguished Democratic leadership to help pass, at that time, which was the federal ban on assault weapons. We can't do enough to create a safe environment in all of our communities, certainly in our cities, and certainly in every one of our schools. No student, no child should leave their home in the morning with a concern about going to their school and their school safety. They should be able to concern about their homework and what they want to do after school. So as an advocate, as someone who has stood loudly but taken action and will continue to do it, and has visited all too many, whether it's a wake or a funeral for those that are the victims of gun violence, I know the concerns. I've been there. We as a society need to recognize this is something we need to change. I'll continue to be a loud voice on it as mayor. I hope as your next governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Our next question is from Christine Stewart. We'll ask it of Mayor Ganem, please.
Trust in government is at an all-time low. What would you do to restore trust?
There is the desire, I think, by people to kind of know what you're getting when you say you're going to do something, to do it and get it done, whether it's in the course of campaign or once you're elected. I think with that, I think one of the challenges we have in Connecticut, why there's such a distrust in government, why there's such an ill feeling, and not only because of the fiscal morass, but the failure, the ability, I think, on a state level to let people understand some of the dynamics of how where the problem came from, how it exists, and then I think ultimately what people want to hear is how you're going to fix it. And whether those decisions, I've learned in my public service, especially when I came in and the city was bankrupt, and we had to make difficult decisions. And I said, look, I'm not going to make a lot of friends in this first 6 months or a year, but I'm going to tell people what I think we need to do. Hopefully they'll support me. Maybe they'll elect me again if that opportunity comes up, but I'm going to put this thing back on track. That's what we have to do in Connecticut. If we're going to understand what people want, it's going to be answers that will deal with the challenges that we face. They want stability in fiscal stability in state government. They want to know what they're going to get for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and then they want you to execute with a result. And the other thing we don't do enough of is letting people know how some of these decisions, hopefully if they're beneficial, will benefit. When you spend money on transportation infrastructure, explain to people how you're looking to benefit or reduce the commute time, or make our highways safer, or what the challenges could be if we don't do that. So I'm not saying I'm the greatest at it. I think I understand and recognize it on a local level. I hopefully will have the opportunity to do it on a state level with some of the challenges we have. Doing what you say you're going to do.
Sir. Time's up.
I'll give it over to you.
Thank you. Mr. Lamont.
Trust in politicians is at an all-time low, and it should be at an all-time low. First and foremost, don't get judged by your promises. Get judged by your results. I'm somebody, I want to be able to look you in the eye, and I tell you something, I want you to know that you can take it to the bank, that you can believe that, and I'll do everything I can to get it done. I'm listening to the promises made in this political campaign. I heard the Republican debate here. We're going to eliminate $9 billion of income tax revenue. $9 billion. And we're also going to, help our cities and invest in education, and by the way, get our transportation system going. I think people know that that's a lie. And I think they've been lied to for an awful long time here in the political landscape. And I think it's time you had somebody to tell you the truth. The truth is we're going to have one tough time getting through this budget crisis, but you're going to want somebody who does it on a fair-minded basis. You're going to want a Democrat who does it so we don't balance it on the backs of the most vulnerable. You're going to want a Democrat who's committed to our cities and a champion for our cities. And I can't promise you a pony, but I can promise you we're going to get this thing going, and you're going to know where we're going as a state at the end of 4 years.
Thank you, sir. At this time, we have time for one more question before we have to get to our closing statements. I'd like to interject a question here, if I may. I'd like to give you each a minute and a half to answer that, and I'd like to ask you to adhere to that minute and a half. I know this is a hot topic. This week, I watched a colleague eulogize his son for opioid addiction. He overdosed. Can you address that? Minute and a half. We'll start with, were we up? Mr. Lamont.
Mr. Lamont, I went to New London a couple of weeks ago, and I was there at a halfway house with a lot of parents whose kids had died of opioid addiction. It is non-discriminatory. He hits everybody, and it hits with a vengeance, and it kills. And we have an epidemic in this state. We have an epidemic in many of our communities going forward. And I think it's outrageous that our political leaders have not taken the lead on this going forward. Look, I'll tell you, I heard a couple of things. I heard that that our police and our fire can do a lot better in terms of quick response. I can hear that medical treatment for opioid treatment is much more effective than having to go with a lot of beds and more expensive ways to do that. But I think you need a governor that listens and takes care and realizes the pain that folks are going through. I saw that in the eyes of these mothers. I saw them because they had a son who was at the top of his game, and all of a sudden he broke a leg, he broke a limb, a doctor overprescribed something, and here he was 6 months later dead. And this is something that I will make as an absolute priority. I will put money behind opioid treatment. I will make sure this scourge ends, and I will do it with compassion and heart because there's no other way to treat it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I
Mayor
can see
Ganem.
the sensitivity you bring to this as a personal topic. So my feelings are with you and those that you talk about. This is and has become such an epidemic, not just in Connecticut, but across the country. Months ago, I joined the mayor of Waterbury in a lawsuit as one way to challenge the industry, the pharmaceutical industry, for collusion that's been proven with doctors to overprescribe. So what's happening? They're taking good people who are just contributing members, as you said, prescribing them legal, maybe too much, overdose, pushing it on it, and then you're turning people into not only addicts, but people whose lifestyles go sideways. These are people's mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, child. In Bridgeport and in the region, we've done an awareness through our health directors to try and raise the level of awareness is one. Two, as I've said, we brought lawsuits. Three, on a state level, whether it's through the legalization of, let's say we understand the sensitivities of legalizing maybe marijuana. Some of those funds have been talked about, at least by me and others, as a way to be directed towards this as a challenge of a cause. We're losing too many people, many young people, to this scourge, and it cuts across every economic, every geographic level, and invades the beautiful lives of so many people. I don't think there's enough we can do. Public officials, in partnership with private, and I hope the courts will back us up on this and what we're trying to do in Connecticut. But thank you for sharing that with us.
And we would like to be part of that, the Connecticut Realtors. At this point, we're going to move on to our closing statements. You'll each have a minute and 30 seconds as we established at the beginning, and we'll start with Mayor Ganem.
I want to thank everyone here, whether you're in the audience, your shout out to those online or watching this, to putting it together, for bearing with us a little bit for a moment or two. But our state faces some very difficult challenges, but I'd also like to say some great opportunities. And the question that's being posed tonight is who's best equipped to lead Connecticut and move it forward? Who has the experience to steer our budgets to be balanced and to create jobs? Who has the background and the experience and ability to work with diverse groups, whether it's labor and management or people of different views, to get us to a common ground or a better ground for serving the public, and in this case, the state of Connecticut? And who's shown the ability to connect and work with diverse communities and people of all backgrounds? It's August 14th, you'll have a choice. Now, I'm here because 32,000 people signed my petitions and allowed me to stand here as a candidate, not a small handful of party insiders. And I'm someone who understands the challenges of families that are struggling in our state and have a decade of accomplishments of working hard with people in Connecticut to try and improve their lives. I'd ask you today, if you're listening at home or here, to join our grassroots campaign at GANM2018.com. Now, I know my opponent Ned's going to have millions in slick TV ads, but supporting our campaign at GANM2018.com can send a strong message that you too want to build a better Connecticut that works for everyone, not just for a wealthy few. Thank you for your support. Let's build one Connecticut that works for all of us. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Mr. Mayor? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Lamont, you have a minute and 30 seconds, sir.
Michael, thank you for your help, and everybody here for being part of this. Thanks for those excellent questions. Christine, I liked your I love Lois's questions, don't get me wrong. But I think the question about politicians being held in low regard. I think it's time that you have people tell you the truth, and it's going to be a hard truth we have in the state. They've been lying to you for an awful long time across the board here in the political landscape. You need somebody, A, who's going to tell you the truth, and B, gets on with folks. It's true. I have a lot of support from folks in labor. I'm going to bring them to the table. I'm going to treat them with respect. And they know that I'll treat them fairly, but they'll be part of the solution. I have a lot of support from folks in business. They are going to be part of the solution. I'm going to work with business and labor. I'm going to work with Republicans and Democrats. I'm going to work with good faith, because you can take my word on it. That's the only way we get through this. We cannot pit town against city and suburb and rich against poor and black against white. That just tears this state apart. We're a small state. We're in it together, and we're going to get through this thing together, Joe. And that's why I'm running for governor. Look, I'm not doing this for any other reason. I'm 64. You've heard that. I'm not doing this for a stepping stone. I don't want to go anywhere else. I want to take the slings and arrows. I'll make the tough decisions, but I want this to be a place where your parents can call home, where our kids know there'll be a place of opportunity. That's what I want to do. And at the end of 4 years, probably 4 years, if I'm making all the tough decisions, getting on, I'll be very happy to be able to say we got our job done, we kept our faith with the people, and we got Connecticut moving again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good job, buddy.
You too. Great job.
I have one last question for Mr. Lamont. What kind of car is that you're driving in this new commercial?
It's a good-looking Chevy, isn't it?
It's a good-looking Chevy, yes.
Rolls Royce.
I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I want to thank our media partners, WTNH. Please join me in a big round of applause for them. I want to also thank our Connecticut Realtor staff for the work that they've put into this. Without them, it's not possible. I would like to thank you, our audience here at the Schubert Theater in New Haven, and I'd also like to thank our viewing audience at home on Facebook and on TV9. Thank you. And I would like you to join me in thanking our participants, our candidates, for coming up here tonight, being good sports, and duking it out. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, that's right. We come up here.
Great job.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, sir. You did a great job.
Sir. Great job.
Really good.
Appreciate it, gentlemen. I appreciate it. We'll see you.
Great job.
Thank you. Well done.
As Joe could say, thank you.
Well done. Well